Meantime, a lot has been said about Africa's emerging tech scene, and with all of its promise, however, actual investment in tech startups there is still lacking. In 2016, only $129 million was invested in all of African tech startups. That's less than the amount some Silicon Valley startups raise in a single round. That's where the Digital Financial Services Lab, also known as DFS, aims to come in. Founded in 2016, the initiative is an early-stage incubator that supports fintech businesses in developing countries. Backed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, DFS Lab recently announced a $250,000 investment in 4 separate fintech startups that service all of Africa. Joining us now to discuss DFS Lab's director, Kendall. So talk about this initial investment.
Okay, well, thanks for having me on first.
You're welcome.
The initial investment, we've got 4 new companies that we're adding to our portfolio, and they're based in Kenya, 2 of them, Pula, which is doing micro insurance using satellite data, and Pizesha, which is one of the first peer-to-business online lending marketplaces in Africa. We've got one in Ghana, which is doing a really interesting play, creating an online identity platform to identify people for financial services. And then finally, there's Teller, which is based in the United States, serving Africa and South Asia, and they're creating natural language processing chatbots to help people use their financial services more naturally.
It's great to have this seed funding for these companies, I'm sure, but it's still a drop in the bucket compared to the kind of numbers we see in Silicon Valley. Why do you think that is?
Well, some of it's history. I mean, if you look at Africa, it's 1 billion people, a largely young population, rising incomes, a lot of interest in new services and new technologies. A lot of new infrastructure has been put in place, a lot of new mobile networks, and the adoption of mobile phones has been going gangbusters over just the past few years. But in the longer history, there's obviously been challenges in the past with governance and with exits and investments and things like that. And so I think investors are still thinking of Africa the way it used to be, whereas we see it as an emerging opportunity with a lot of new consumers hungry for new products.
Talk to us about the startup landscape there, what sort of trends you're seeing, and how developed these trends actually are.
Yeah, well, a lot of the investment that is happening is kind of clustered around a few specific markets, so Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa. And the trends you're seeing are ones where, they're often applying technologies to really bring down the cost. If you want to serve low-income people with financial services where they want to buy in really small packet sizes, very small insurance contracts, tiny micro payment transactions, tiny loans, the costs have to be super, super efficient so that you can serve those people. So a lot of the companies that are successful are finding ways to really drive down costs per user and things like that.
So what is the most promising trend in African tech right now?
Wow, I definitely think the emergence and adoption of smartphones there. The population in Africa, roughly speaking, there's maybe 50 or 60% of the population has a mobile phone. A lot of them are not smartphones, but smartphone usage has doubled in the past 2 years and growing from admittedly a pretty small base, but really charging ahead. And so that lays a really strong basis, connecting people for all kinds of other digital services on top of it.
Among the challenges, in addition to funding, energy and power, things that are very important to operating a business, there are days-long blackouts at a time.
That's right.
How do you handle that?
Well, people get creative. There's generators all over the place. Half the households in Nigeria have their own generator. So people create fail-safes and backup systems. One of our advisors actually is a guy named Nick Hughes, and he's created an off-grid solar power solution that uses mobile technology to finance it. And that's popping up all over Kenya and giving people sort of an off-grid solution. So we actually see a huge opportunity where a lot of people see a risk, right? Where there's a lot of missing infrastructure, either in the financial side or just basic electricity and things like that. A lot of entrepreneurs are actually stepping in to fill that gap and create businesses to sell infrastructure services and creative solutions to some of those problems.
What's been the involvement of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation?
Well, the DFS Lab was started actually as a partnership between Caribou Digital, which is kind of the host company that's been incubating us, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And the Gates Foundation's interest is really in supporting the application and development of new cutting-edge technologies to that problem of how do you bank that last 2 billion people on the planet who don't have financial services. And that's exactly what our companies are doing. They're applying things like natural language processing, satellite imagery, biometrics to creating that next generation of financial services.
All right, Jake Kendall, DFS Labs, thank you so much for
you.
joining us. We'll keep our eye on you guys from the other side of the globe. Coming up.